and thank you all for having me. Today we're going to talk about the wonderful world of monkey flowers. So a talk about monkey flowers wouldn't be complete without a bedazzling slide of beautiful monkey flowers. On this top row we have 4 species in the genus of Erythranthe, which we'll talk about. We'll get there. I'm not using the name Mimulus today. And then on the bottom row are a smattering of Diplochus species. And you can just see how incredibly diverse they are in terms of their floral form, which has made them a very attractive system for studies in ecology and evolutionary biology, as I'm sure many of you all are aware. So monkey flowers are in the family Phrymaceae, the lopseed family, and worldwide, it's not an extraordinarily diverse family. There's only about 200 species worldwide, and that's largely composed of the Western North American diversification of monkey flowers. They are a group of herbaceous species, so the only woody or shrubby species in the whole family are shrubby bush monkey flowers, the Diplochus aurantiacus species complex. And in fact, the majority of the species are annual plants, with over half of the diversity being teeny tiny annuals. On that first slide I had Diplochus jeffsoni, which is, that picture was from Lassen Volcanic National Park. I don't know if you noticed that was a little pen tip at the end of the photo. This is a group that is extraordinarily diverse here in Western North America, where over 70% of the species occur. But in fact, this is a group that is quintessentially a California group. Over half of the species diversity worldwide occur here in California. So that's why we're also enamored with this wonderful, incredibly diverse group. They also happen to be a group of conservation concern, which is why I have adopted this as my favorite research plant group, because I'm interested in plant conservation. Over 60 species has some kind of conservation listing in some state, and many are considered globally rare, many narrow endemics. Their study is incredibly important to the conservation of our native flora. So some of you all might be asking, so what happened to monkey flowers? So there have been a few things that have happened in terms of their taxonomy, including generic reassignment. I heard grumblings this morning about generic name changes. But yes, as we learn new information related to the family tree of life, name changes will happen because it reflects our understanding of plant diversity. We've also had, in addition to these changes at the genus level, we also have modified species delimitation. So we all knew about the species formerly known as Mimulus guttatus kind of has exploded, and as actually many species have been resurrected, and so many Erythranthe species now encompass the former Erythranthe guttata. But in addition to increased sort of dividing species finer base and resurrecting names, we've also had new species that have been described, several of them here in Northern California, and so we'll be talking about those today. Just to note on this slide, I have 2 pink monkey flowers, which superficially, is like, oh, those are pink monkey flowers. But indeed, one is an Erythranthe palmeri, which was a species subject of my dissertation, and Diplochus biglobii, the big lobe's monkey flower, which is dominant in our desert. So just to revisit this name change at the genus level, this is the tree of life for monkey flowers, a schematic of what we know about the phylogeny. And the reason this name change has occurred is because we've learned a lot about evolutionary relationships. And so the first species described in Mimulus was Mimulus ringens, described by Linnaeus in species Plantarum. And so here is Mimulus ringens, and you can see it is here in a clade with many other genera from Asia and Australia. And in fact, it is not closely related to the Western North American diversification, which include 2 very species-rich lineages, including the Diplochus clade and the Erythranthe clade. And so this is in part why the genus name has been changed, but it's not only supported by this family tree, it's also supported by morphology. So when we look at the morphological characteristics that define these groups, Erythranthe is known as the long pedicel group. So the pedicels here are generally longer than the length of the calyx, whereas in Diplochus, the petals are generally very short, less than the length of the calyx, or absent. Mimotanthe is a monotypic genus, and it has long pedicels similar to Erythranthe. It's actually more closely related to Diplochus, which is, you can see actually in its fruiting characteristics, it has similar placentation, the way the seeds are attached in the ovary. But it's distinct because the calyx lobes are not ribbed. They don't have these ribs, where in Diplochus and Erythranthe you can see they have what's called a plicate calyx, or a ribbed calyx. So I just thought I'd kind of break this down for you all, so we can this is the key, sensu fraga in Jepsen efflora. We look at the first couplet, and it asks about this characteristic I mentioned about pedicel length. And so here you see it asks that the pedicel is less than the length of the calyx if the corolla is semi-persistent. And here in Diplochus, you can see that the corolla here, this flower is heading to fruit, and the corolla is hanging on, and it has short pedicels. And here in this long pedicelled Erythranthe, you can see those corollas fell off. This is actually a species that has one-day flowers. But as soon as it's pollinated, the flower essentially falls off, and they have deciduous corollas. And so then when we look at the second couplet, it asks if you have a perennial, and if the corolla is lavender to purple, the corolla throats are horizontally compressed and nearly closed. And here you key out a true Mimulus species, Mimulus ringens. Or if you're an annual and perennial herb, and the corolla color would be various, a wide range in colors we know Mimulus has. But if the throat is horizontally compressed and closed, like these have closed throats, this one's an open throat, but if it has a closed throat, then the flower is yellow, and you have this sort of guttatus complex. And then finally, the third couplet asks, if you're an annual and your calyx lobes are longer than the calyx tube with faint, unraised midribs, plants hairs dense, long, and soft. Or if you're annual perennial herb and the calyx lobes are shorter than the calyx tube with prominent midribs, plant hairy or glabrous. So here really pointing to the calyx, where in the Mimotanthe pilosa it doesn't have those distinct ribs, and also the sepal lobes are separated here, and they're actually go almost halfway down, whereas in Erythranthe you just have these little calyx teeth, and you don't have strong lobes, and you have the ribs. So I feel like I provide my evidence that there is morphology to back up, and we can actually key these out, which is what everyone's asking for, right? Here we have, just to note, true Mimulus is now reduced to 7 species, and 2 of them occur in North America, Mimulus elatus and Mimulus ringens, and you can see those 2 species actually look very similar, and they actually look very dissimilar to, I would say, to many of our North American Mimulus monkey flowers, Erythranthe and Diplochus, excuse me. But the Mimulus genus is actually known primarily for having these blue, purple flower color, and so that's something that's distinct about them and different from other monkey flowers. And then now you have Diplochus. There are 43 species in California. They are essentially a California group because 47 species total. It is endemic to North America. It traditionally only included the shrubby species, but it has been expanded to include many annuals, including here Diplochus torii, which is a Northern California species, and the desert Diplochus bigelowii. And Erythranthe is the largest genus in the family, with 58 species recognized in California, but 120 species worldwide. They also occur in South America, in Asia, so those are other centers of diversity for this group, but largely it is a Western North American genus, and it's specifically many species in California. It's known for highly variable species complexes. This is a very complicated group, so Erythranthe guttata in this group, very difficult to identify. So just a summary of what some of the changes that have taken place. So in the Jepsen, second edition of the Jepsen Manual, published in 2012, it was essentially a recycling of the 1993 treatment with some minor modifications, particularly in the bush shrubby monkey flowers. But now the Jepson eFlora, which is available online, shows that now we have 103 taxa total, and as opposed to 72 before, which is a 43% increase in diversity. That's incredible. And so that's a combination of species that have been resurrected, but also newly described species. So, what are these new species? We're in the new discovery section. So let's talk about that. So here are some new species that have been described that are native to Northern California. I want to address what my monkey flower partner in crime, Steve Schoenig, who's in the audience. He described a monkey flower in 2017 so that it was published in time to be included in the Flora of North America treatment. It's also included in Jepson eFlora. This is a Diplochus graniticula, so named because it occurs in granite outcrops in rock crevices. And this is a species that's known from in and around, from the Sierra Nevada, in and around, it occurs in Yosemite National Park, in the Sierra National Forest, in various locations. And so that species has been named. Wonderful, new, beautiful species. It's photographed right there. Diplochus cusickioides is very interesting. It's something you may have called Diplochus cusickii in Modoc County. And basically, the type species for Diplochus cusickii is from southeastern Oregon and is actually fairly restricted, and it's a narrow endemic. So largely, almost everything called Diplochus cusickii is now largely Diplochus cusickioides. Diplochus thompsoni is a species that David Thompson, who was a monkey flower taxonomist and wrote a monograph of the Diplochus group, he identified these group of populations that he thought were hybrids between Diplochus nanus and Diplochus biglovii, and Guy Neeson, in preparing for the Flora of North America treatment, felt that this was actually a distinct species that had a distinct range, and then so named them after Dave Thompson. So now Diplochus thompsoni has a name. It's actually a little bit complex in terms of its morphological variability, and I think needs some additional study. So we talked about some new species that have been described, but actually what I want to convey here is that there is so much more work that needs to be done in Western North American monkey flowers, and many new species are likely to be described, and so perhaps in 5 years there'll be a new presentation where we have 10 more new species of monkey flowers. So the Diplochus nanus group is one of these groups that are very complicated, very morphologically complex, widespread, needs study. Fortunately, a student by the name of Samuel Macaulay, who's at the University of Idaho, is working on it. And just to note that Diplochus nanus Paul Beardsley, in his Phylogeny of Western North American monkey flowers, sampled multiple accessions from different populations and noted that it's polyphyletic. So we already know that there's a lot going on here, and it needs further study. So be on the lookout. You find funky populations of Diplochus nanus, you can send them my way, because Sam and I are collaborating on a project, and I'm submitting a proposal hoping to get funding to study this group more, so he and I can team up. In the Erythranthe group, you all have probably been made aware of prior symposiums here that Erythranthe trinitiensis and Erythranthe taylori are newly described species. And then also there are two species, Erythranthe porcalis and Erythranthe willisii, named after John Willis, who's at Duke. The latter two are on serpentine. So I actually don't recognize the Erythranthe willisii in the Jepson eFlora because I think it needs further study. When Guy Neeson originally described it, he described it from 4 or 5 populations, and then in a subsequent publication he said, no, it's actually only known from the type locality. And so it's only known from one population, and it needs further study. So I'm going to head there hopefully sometime soon. If anyone would like to join me, we can figure this out. So this is a chart to note that monkey flower taxonomy, as with any group, is pretty complex. So the yellow bar represents all available names that have ever been published. The blue bar represents, so this is for the most species diverse lineages in the group. The blue bar represents, so what do we currently recognize? So In the Guttatus group, there's 108 names available. We currently recognize 51. In the prior treatment, only 15 were recognized, and in the phylogeny, only 12 are sampled. So there's just a lot to learn, and I would be hesitant to name a new species in Erythranthes section Semiola just because there's so many names available, to make sure that it actually doesn't have a name already that can be applied. It's a very complicated group. And so there are many challenges to studying monkey flowers. It was like, why haven't we figured this out already? Why don't we know all the species? Well, this is a herbarium specimen of Diplochus thomsoni, and just to note, when they're pressed, especially these small annuals, they lose a lot of information, and they're really hard to study based on herbarium specimens alone. So they do require rigorous field work, and there are challenges with field work because they are small, they can be difficult to find, they quickly fade, so they're evanescent. They depend on it to rain for them to show themselves. And so I found that photography is actually really critical to doing work in this group. So just in summary, I'd like to note that monkey flowers are frontiers for species discovery, and we have a lot more to understand. There's much more work to be done. If you're interested in working in monkey flowers, there's plenty of room for everyone to do some research in this group. So I invite you all to come study with me. Not literally but we can work together. There are many species-rich lineages that require more study, and so I think this should really follow an integrative approach that combines field work with collections and molecular phylogenetic studies, so we can really tease apart and understand species diversity in our state. So I want to thank my monkey flower collaborators because they provide me with lots of great ideas. We have great conversation. So this is a sea of Erythranthes montioides from Big Meadow in the Sequoia National Forest, and lurking in there is a Diplochus. Here it is, Diplochus bicolor, a hybrid with Diplochus leptalius. Is it a hybrid? Is it a new species? We don't know. So we'll figure that out. So thank you.